Time for us to take a look at the evolving security dynamics in West Africa. Now, recent reports have highlighted Turkiye's deployment of fighters from the Turkish-controlled Free Syrian Army to several Sahel countries, including Nigeria. Now, this development, confirmed by various Middle Eastern and Western media outlets, corroborates what SBM Intelligence has been monitoring since late 2023.
Now, these fighters are ostensibly deployed to guard Turkish-operated businesses, but the nature of their mission has raised significant concerns about regional security and stability. Now, today we delve deeper into this issue with insight from experts in local report. Joining us now is Confidence McHarry, a senior security analyst, SBM Intelligence. Thank you very much for joining us on the story here this morning.
Yeah, thank you once again for having me.
Grant, so I've got a question for Confidence here. I'd like to know, regarding recent reports, it indicates that Turkiye is deploying fighters from the Turkish-controlled Free Syrian Army to several countries in the Sahel. So can you give us an overview of what the development actually entails?
All right, so since December 2023, it has been some kind of a little bit of a movement. For people who've been watching the Sahel region, especially the West African parts of the Sahel, you notice that the exit of American and French military presence has led to an opening where other people, other players would come in. So Russia has taken advantage of the situation. Turkey and the UAE is also taking advantage of the situation. But since we're talking about Turkey today, what SBM has been monitoring since started in late December, when the first news that they were going to deploy fighters to Niger first landed. And so initially we thought there was only going to be Niger, but over the past few years, we've noticed that the same deployments have been done in Togo, they've been done in Mali, and now, according to what reports we're hearing, they're also being deployed to Nigeria. So ostensibly, they were there to guard Turkish businesses. But for what organizations like the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights have said is that since December till date, about 10 of them have been killed. In the 1,000 forces have been deployed. And when we dug deeper, we saw that they were not killed by basically guarding Turkish businesses. They were actively involved in some of the anti-Sahelan operations against jihadists and Islamists in the Sahel.
Against?
Wow.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
Now, speaking about the reports that you just mentioned, it mentions that these fighters received training before being deployed. What kind of training did they even receive? Let's start there. And how effective is it likely to be in terms of this training that they have received?
I should say the kind of training they received is light, very light, and it will also be reflected in the amount of stipends they were given. I think one particular report said annually they are supposed to earn $1,300, which is very meager. And so what the Turkish intelligence or the mercenary group that controls these ex-Free Syrian Army fighters hope to do is that they will carry on their experience in fighting in former rebel-held territories in Aleppo and then bring to West Africa. So they felt that their training, especially their combat experience in the northern part of Syria, is enough for them to just give them a light training and then throw them into the action in West Africa. So it has led to concerns because looking at their history in the Middle East, especially in Syria, they were involved in some of the worst human rights abuses in Aleppo, even something the United Nations have even called them out on. So when you carry this poorly trained and, should I say, in the manner of speaking, poorly motivated fighters to a particular place called the Sahel, where a lot of human rights abuses, both by state forces and non-state actors, take place, it's a ticking time bomb waiting to happen in a manner of speaking.
What about the allegations against human rights violations by the Syrian army? Now, if they're in a relationship with Turkiye, and we also have that relationship going, how does that implicate Nigeria in any way?
So what we found is that our sources in the Nigerian government denied it, that the fighters have been deployed to Nigeria. But let's even assume for a moment that these guys are not deployed to Nigeria. The mere thought that they are deployed next door to Nigeria in Niger leaves a lot of concern. Last week I was in a meeting with an ex-French diplomat, and then it was incredulous at the thought that Nigeria would be sleeping with two eyes closed, and then there are lots of foreign fighters, foreign mercenaries, foreign governments operating, not necessarily even in Nigerian soil, but at least close to that. So the human rights violation toll is there, the concerns are there. But in a region like the Sahel, where state governments are some of the worst abusers of human rights, especially when it comes to extrajudicial killings, I don't really think that they would necessarily be that perturbed to the kind of deployments they are seeing, because in the first place, Turkey is a very good partner to many of the Sahelian countries. One of the things we discovered is that the deployments, especially to Mali, was not necessarily to fight the jihadists. It was to serve as a Praetorian guard for the current military, the junta in Mali, which is led by Colonel Assimi Goïta, because there seems to be this rivalry between the defense minister and I think Sadio Kamara is his name, and the current junta leader, which he is suspecting, the latter is suspecting that the former is up to something, trying to overthrow him. So he brought in these Turkish militants as a guard against this, because he could not trust his own army, he could not trust his own military. So the end is here for different purposes. Some are for guard duties, for businesses, some are for guard duties for presidential palaces, some are for guard duties for fighting against Sahelian militants.
You talk about SADAT, which is the involvement of this, very controversial private Turkish military company. You've highlighted this, but what role does SADAT play, in these deployments, besides just the ones that you mentioned? What would be the implications of their involvement?
In the first place, we will have to take into account the global appetite for the use of state-backed non-state armed groups and fighting in carrying out operations in what we call situations of gray zone operations. So many states do not really want to expend that much resources, so the private actors come in. So we've seen the same thing in the Wagner Group, which is now called the Russia-Africa Corps. In Nigeria, I think in 2015, before the 2015 election held, the government of Goodluck Jonathan employed the Services of Executive Outcomes, the South African PMC, and now we are seeing the same thing in Turkey. So it's low cost, it's high rewarding. So a lot of these governments have been doing it. And despite Nigeria's protestations, it doesn't seem to work. I remember that when Buhari was president, he spoke quite a lot against this kind of gray zone operations. But given Nigeria's weak standing in the region and given its frayed relationship within ECOWAS, it doesn't really have that clout to impose on member states to follow its lead. So it could talk and talk, all of them would do what they want to do. So in the first place, it's a pointer to how state capacity has severely weakened, and it's also another pointer to how the weakening of state capacity has now grown another impetus for people to assume state functions and then to thrive in the same state functions. So I do think that in the times to come, you're going to be seeing a lot more of them. Maybe not necessarily from Russia alone, maybe not necessarily from Turkey, but I think countries like from the UAE and the likes of them who also are active players in the Sahel region.
Very interesting stuff indeed. Whilst we're talking about the regions, we've seen the development of Turkiye's broader geopolitical strategy in Africa, and very silently moving and spreading its tentacles, I would say. But particularly in relation to its competition with France as well and other Western powers, silently, but is it powerful?
Yep, it is. It is, because the relationship between Nigeria, for instance, and Turkey goes back at least 100 years. The Izala sect in Nigeria, for instance, has close ties to Turkey, just like the Shiites in Nigeria has close ties with Iran. But one thing you have to give credit to the Turks is the fact that, according to what you said, they've been silently moving. This silent moves has been in the working since 2019. I remember then when French President Emmanuel Macron actively accused both Turkey and Russia for inflaming anti-French sentiments in the Sahel. So it was more like they have not necessarily been sitting on their hands waiting for the French and the Americans to leave. They have been trying to push them out through influence operations, influence peddling, and then trying to activate the soft power they have been using through religion for about a century. But what really has buoyed Turkish influence in the Sahel through the use of SADAT and the likes is that over the past 4 years, they've shown capacity in terms of military. They've been involved in a lot of conflicts, not only in northern Syria, but in the Middle East, and also in Libya, where the SADAT private mercenary corps was very, very instrumental in preventing General Khalifa Haftar from taking over Tripoli some 3 years ago. And very importantly, what gives impetus to Turkish influence is the use of the Bayraktar TB2 drones, especially in combat zones in Nagorno-Karabakh in the war between Armenia and Azerbaijan in 2020. Without the entry of those Turkish drones, it was very, very difficult to envisage an Azeri victory. But the Turkish drones changed the tide. So what happened between 2020 and now is that we've seen a lot of countries in West Africa and Africa as a whole ordering for Turkish drones. So in competition with Western drones, which are much more expensive and difficult to maintain. So Turkey supplies these drones to Libya, it supplies to Nigeria. I think the relationship between the Turkish defense, aerospace defense industry and Nigeria dates back to when Buratai was chief of army staff. So that was when we have started, trying to get parts of, Turkish drones to fight insurgency and insecurity in the northwest. So these relationships transcend continents, transcend borders and everything. So I think as time goes on, the relationship is much likelier to develop more than
Nigeria is in possession of some of these drones,
Yes,
now,
it
aren't
is.
we? Almost half of Africa are either in possession or are awaiting delivery of these drones.
Yeah.
These relationships with SADAT, like we've mentioned, interestingly, they're based on intel, information that, well, one would want to guard as a sovereignty, as a nation.
Yep.
What are the risks then if we have Turkey having most of our data or information about our, perhaps maybe, whatever it is these drones are
Sophisticated technology.
Yeah,
as
not just
as a
technology, but information as well.
Drone,
How is it a risk?
But on paper, it's supposed to be a risk, you understand? But the question of national security is not so much a burden on the political leaders of the region as much as regime security. So the people you are concerned about, the people who should be concerned about these things, they are not necessarily concerned with foreign countries having their data. They are more about control. So if they don't mind handing over this sensitive data through electronic intelligence or through data peddling or anything to these countries, as far as it ensures their survival. So the average Nigerian elite or the average Nigerian leaders thinking, the most important thing is not national security. It is regime security. So it doesn't even mind aligning with the devil to get that particular thing done or to get that particular point, which is why, back to the point I made earlier about my ex-French diplomats being concerned that Nigeria is not concerned about the influx of these foreign elements into an area where it is naturally considered Nigeria's background. The people who are supposed to be concerned, they do not really see it as a core, and much of the people who should bring their attention to it do not really see it much as a responsibility, and to an extent it feeds into what I personally have been written, and SBM has been shouting for quite some time, that Nigeria's diplomatic clout, Nigeria's geopolitical standing in the region has been so badly defeated and so badly depleted that our domestic issues are taking too much of our time that we do not readily see the need to play geopolitical games that we are supposed to be playing. As a result, we have left that responsibility to outside players from the Middle East, from Eastern Europe, and from the West to play in the same space where it would naturally should have been thriving.
Confidence. That's a very, very valuable insights, I would say. And honestly, I wish I could stretch this conversations even further, but unfortunately, we're pressed for time and we have to let you go. Thank you so much, Confidence.
Thank you so much.
This situation, of course, as you said, it requires very careful monitoring and coordinated response from Nigeria, especially for those that are concerned when it comes to our geopolitical space. And this Confidence McHarry is a senior security analyst at SBM Intelligence.